Do I have time to go make some tea?
No, you have no time to make some tea because I already started recording. Welcome to I Mustache You Something. My brother, Paul. Uh, we don't need the DNA test to prove what we already know, is joining me today. Mary was just leaving, but I wanted her to be here so you guys can see who is going to be an upcoming guest.
I've not been scheduled yet, by the way. Not on schedule.
She's on the schedule of my heart. So Mary wanted to say hello and to complain about me in public. Mary, thanks for coming.
Okay,
so welcome, Paul. Welcome to I Mustache You Something.
Thank you. It's good to be here. You know, I've seen only a few episodes of your show. I'm mostly a fan. You know, a lot of good content there.
All right, just put it right out there. Say your piece. I know what you're going to say, and it's 100% valid. You are right. I am wrong. So tell the people what you think.
I think it's interesting how you're bringing together people who, you know, your audience knows a lot of the people who are going to be on your show, but your larger audience doesn't know anyone who's on the show. So it's interesting how, like, I guess this is more of a question for you, Mina. Like, who is your audience for this show? Like, who's watching? And I'm assuming it's.
I don't know. And one of the things that I have always done is not really question too much what I think needs to be done or what I want to do. Like, if it's interesting to me and if it's something that I can get one person to do, great, let's do it. So if someone else happens to listen to it, awesome. If it's just you and me talking and we enjoy our conversation, that's also great.
That makes sense. I can definitely.
I'm giving space for I'm giving space for the audience to define themselves.
So you're putting the content out there, and you'll see where the chips land and who may engage, who may not engage, and that's pretty interesting. And I'm curious, has there been any surprises in those who have been engaging and those who haven't been? And tell me more about that.
So I love how you've turned this around and you're stashing me questions, which is very Paul.
That's right.
Oh, wait, you're gonna take your mask off?
Yeah, because I have a mustache. I wanted to just have a little bit of.
I wish the resolution on your camera was better, because all we see is, man, that is beautiful. I wish we could see it better.
I don't know. Is it not clear on your side? Because from here it looks pretty fantastic, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. And real life is.
I mean, I just wanted to have a little bit of a reveal, because I'm gonna mustache you for the next 30 to 45 plus minutes. Let's do this.
I think, listen, if there's one thing that I know about Paul Kist, is that he turns the tables on me and others. So, you know, why not? Why not? But don't think you're gonna get out of answering some questions here.
For sure. Fair.
So one very nice surprise was the chair of the select board for our town. Saw my conversation with Angie Awad, and saw that we were talking about, you know, mental health and destigmatizing mental health and the need to have conversations, you know, where people feel that they can say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm struggling, I don't know how to move forward with this situation, and for that to be something that we are able to talk about, and something that we don't feel like, oh, like I'm going to be othered and I'm going to be shamed and I'm
Mm,
not going to be accepted in my community.
mm.
And you know, he shared like the video clip to people of our town, so that it's not just Coptic people that have a mental health stigma. It's people. Like it's
It's
not.
people. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Totally.
so I was really I was really encouraged by that, and that's why, you know, I'm not going to look at it and be like, no, this is for Zakopts, only for Zakopts. Like, no,
Right.
like if someone listens to it and benefits from
Mm.
it, like, great, that's awesome.
But I think it's important to note that, when we say that people have a stigma with mental health issues, I don't think it's universal as far as like human beings, Homo sapiens, because I think in other cultures and cultures in the past, people with mental health issues were oftentimes elevated and honored because they saw the world differently. And I wouldn't be surprised if many folks who were deemed as, holy men or prophets in other times. Um, in today's culture may be institutionalized or medicated. So there's definitely like a whole thread around, the stigma around mental health. And actually, I have some things to say on this topic, but we could go there, because there's a yeah yeah, totally, why not, um, because I think, growing, so my dad is a psychiatric pharmacist who just retired, by the way, like after like 15 years of deliberation, finally decided that it was time. And so the topic of mental health was always very close to our home because there was always conversation about, like, kind of work he does and the kind of challenges he faces at work, and the kind of, because he was always working for like state institutions and stuff. Um, and I remember even growing up, we were like watching, like, yes, I was watching He-Man and Voltron, but I was also watching like The One Who Flew the Cuckoo's Nest. Like that was something I remember watching at the age of like 6 and understanding, well, what is this place, and Jack Nicholson's character, and like what's the difference between a criminal and someone who's like suffering from from mental illness. And I remember it was maybe 6 years ago, I was actually diagnosed with ADHD by a psychiatrist. And I remember, just it was a difficult realization, just because it's not something I'd ever even seen myself as. And it was one of those things where um, that would never have been picked up in previous tests. Why? Because I was raised by an Egyptian dad who taught me how to do things very, like, structured and linear. And so I'm able to do life that way. But I remember this doctor who I had spoken with said, you must be spending a lot of energy um, overcompensating because of this sort of way of thinking that you have. And I remember what was really interesting about it is, after, like, he asked me if I wanted to um, go on medication or try a more herbal path. And I'm like, yeah, let's do the herbal thing, because I'm not really sure what this thing is we're calling a disorder, is ADHD disorder. And I remember I was given a book by a close friend, sort of rethinking about what the hell ADHD actually means, and is it actually a disorder, or is it just a way of thinking that is not compatible with the ways the majority of society operates. Um, and relating to myself from that perspective had actually freed me up in terms of seeing this as almost like a superpower, a spidey sense, a way of thinking that's different, that allows me to do things that maybe others can't do. And maybe it makes other things that may be expected of me, or maybe a little bit more challenging, but at the end of the day, it is just another way of being in this dynamic world called life and nature. Um, so yeah, I think the topic of mental illness is one that is interesting, not from the perspective of destigmatizing the fact that people do suffer and people are ill and people do need help and support from the community, from their families, but also to ask the question, when we call something a disorder, is it actually a disorder? And how can we, um, are there benefits and gifts in these things that we sort of stigmatize and label? Um, and as long as we're medicating, it's hard to say, like, you medicate a problem. You don't you don't medicate when something's good. So there's we're not even, I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface. Like, yes, good, we're destigmatizing, but like, we're not even tapping into the potential of what we can learn about ourselves and about each other, and what people who, again, who are stigmatized in this way, what they can offer this world if they see what they're going through, not necessarily as a disorder, but maybe as something different. And that does not at all negate the fact that there are people who are really suffering deeply. And this is not something that people would ever choose. And some conditions are a lot more maybe impactful in a more difficult slash negative way than others. So it's, again, it's not a simple thing like everything's great, everything's bad. It's like everything's everything. You just gotta, you know, give give
Everything's
yeah,
everything.
everything. Yeah, so
So everything is kind of the way Paul
mm,
lives. And for those of you that don't know Paul, he has a sort of a Monday through Friday career in um, computer. Computer, eh? What's the computer? Computer?
yes, that's exactly it. I work in the computer.
Yeah, like you.
You know,
So I never get it right. So what's that? Yeah, تشتغل ايه computer.
I'm a software engineer,
ماشي, software engineer. Um,
which,
and
for the record, for my being in software engineering, my family always comes to me with IT advice and how do you fix a printer and things that like I have no clue about, just in terms of my training and career. But it's just, hey, you work in computer, like and you did the same thing, you just did the same thing, and I appreciate that.
I
Even though like we've had this conversation before, but it's cool, it's
but I don't want to say the wrong thing, and in trying not to say the wrong thing, what do I
say
do?
say
I
the
say
wrong
the
thing,
wrong
man.
thing. So
Say the wrong thing, what's the
so
right thing?
I'm always afraid. You know me. I'm very shy about what I say. I
Hmm.
keep things
Right.
close to the vest. I have trouble expressing myself. So I just wanted to
Hmm.
leave space for you to share with us your sort of quote unquote day job, like your sort of
Hmm.
professional expertise.
Yeah.
um, Paul is also very talented musically, and if you've heard of Trinity, Paul is the producer. Is that the right title? The producer.
Yeah, I was the producer of that record. I think
And
that the so,
also, like you wrote songs for Trinity.
mhm, yes.
um, and this comes from a gift of music that Paul has, where I remember being in middle school, and um, I was not allowed to watch The Simpsons because it was too
Yeah.
risque. I was
Yes.
allowed to watch Married with Children, which I still don't understand. But The Simpsons, that was off limits. And Paul was able to, from memory and just like with his ear, reproduce the Simpsons theme. How old were you when you first did that, Paul?
I remember figuring out like the melody and like the main sort of bum 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 bum, like much younger, like maybe junior high, and then like the orchestration like that, which I think you're referring to, was high
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. So it was really
Mm.
impressive. Like you
And that's
couldn't,
actually yeah. Um,
you appreciate what?
No, I appreciate you remembering that, and I appreciate that piece of work for a few interesting reasons. But most recently, just to like, and I could send you the link to this, but so once once I got access to like MIDI capability, and so for those who aren't plugged into like music technology, MIDI is almost like a musical language for computers. So like music is like, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and that those are notes and those are vibrations and those are represented by frequencies that our ears hear. How do computers talk to each other in music? And if computers were to talk to each other in like the literal like frequency sense. It'd be a lot of information. So MIDI is like a very simple way for a computer to tell another computer, I just played this note. And so I recorded this thing on MIDI, like all the different parts of the Simpsons theme. But MIDI is like one of those technical standards that hasn't changed much since the 80s. And so like the MIDI files that I created in like the early 90s are still valid today. So very recently I actually loaded up that MIDI file from back in the day from like literally 1993, I think. And I loaded it into my like modern software, added like, changed the instrument sounds. And I had a very good friend and brother of mine, Peter Mansour, play the Lisa Simpson saxophone solo on top of it. So it was just so cool to be able to have a jam session with my 16-year-old self, my current self, and like a friend of mine who never knew, who wasn't around, who I don't even know if it was born when when I did that thing. So it's that particular piece brings together all these really cool ideas. So I don't know, sorry. I'll send you the link. We could listen
Oh,
to it
and
later.
I'd love to. And this brings me to the third thing that you have to know about Paul to appreciate the depth of this conversation is that he's a software engineer, he's a talented musician, and those two halves of Paul, among other qualities that he has, all go into this sort of like metaphysical, like 10,000-foot view of personhood where, we have these conversations about like, who are we? How did we get here? And, like we're very different in terms of like, kind of the clay that we're working with, but it's like very evident that we're both trying to make a sculpture. And he's like, look, I made a Simpsons theme. And I go, look, I, did this block of cheese. And he's like, why did you make a block of cheese? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I like cheese. And
I mean,
like,
why did I do a Simpsons theme? Like,
at least I don't know, like, and I'm always like looking at Paul going, oh, wow, that's really interesting what you did. I'm like, I just have this block of cheese. And Paul's like, no, the block of cheese is very good. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, okay,
yeah.
okay, now I'm gonna make a block of salami. And he's like, you go do it. And I end up with blocks of cheese and salami. And Paul ends up with Trinity CDs and Simpsons themes and the Noon Project, which I mentioned on a previous conversation with someone. And the wonderful things that Paul does. But again, like the approach is the same, which is like, okay, like what kind of clay do I have to work with here? And how do I make this clay as meaningful as possible? So I want to ask you, Paul, and maybe this is where maybe even early on in the conversation, I mustache you something. Actually, like for other people, it's been like later. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I have to stash them something.
Yeah, stash me something.
Yeah. So where do you think we get the ability to question norms? Because I think you kind of touched on this in talking about mental health, right? And I can like, so I also like, as like recently, within the last 10 years, was finally diagnosed as ADD, and like people are like, yeah, obviously, like
right.
they needed a test, and I think the norms depend on the environment, right? If the norm is that this kid's hyperactive, the environment is probably one that's expecting a certain like, okay, you sit down, you listen, you take notes. No, you can't doodle like while the teacher's talking. But if the norms are questioned, and I simply explain to the teacher like, hey, doodling helps me focus a little bit, like I'm listening, I hear everything that you're saying, but like this occupies my mind so that I don't get distracted and I can focus better on what you're saying. Then we've questioned a norm and we've addressed it because we've found a shared value, which is not that I look like I'm paying attention, but that I am paying attention. Not like I am the cookie cutter kid that, like,
Right.
sitting there like, yes, teacher, yes, yes,
Yeah.
but the one
Yeah.
that's actually, being thoughtful and engaging with the ideas. So you and I are able to question those norms, but how did we get there? Why are we able to do that?
It's a really good question. And I do reflect on that sometimes. Um, Not just for me, but even when you and I have conversations, because as you say, we are made up of different kinds of clay, and we have different clays in front of us, but we use to make. But like the one thing we share is like we have clay. We're gonna make something. Like that's something that we completely share. What we end up making is completely different, and why we make it is completely different. Um, and I also don't want to forget about this whole like comparing salamis and cheese to like music, because I think that's a total like misconception. Like, you know, what you're creating with clay is I mean, by the way, not to I mean cheese and salami. Like who
I
doesn't like
like
a good
cheese.
plate of charcuterie, you know?
I like them.
Right? Um, I also resisted a salami comparison comment for, so you're welcome. Just, you know.
Thank you. Thank you. Nobody knows what good thing you resisted, because nobody knows what you mean.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things there. I think one of the main factors that I believe led to this is just the fact that by virtue of us being born to immigrant parents who have dropped us off in suburban Long Island could not be any more different than Asyut, Sohag, Alexandria, like Jericho, New York, Plainview, New York. So having to contend with being not cookie cutter was just a survival mechanism we had to do. And I think, you know, growing up, I was super resentful for not being like everyone else. Like, why can't I be like everyone else? Why can't I have a bar mitzvah? Why can't I, like, why can't I go to Hebrew school? Why can't I, like those were the questions that I had. Is like, why, like everyone I know is like doing this, and like we're going to Coptic church on Sundays, and it's like I don't understand. And so, but then even in the church, um, I think growing up no one chooses to question and challenge things. I think some people are more comfortable doing it than others, and I was always very comfortable, questioning things that were presented to me, and I always needed to know why. And I think you're kind of the same way. I envy folks who aren't as curious because I feel like their existences are a lot more simple, but at the same time, it's like, this is the particular kind of animals that we are, and um, so I think it's a product of a few things. It's one of them. It's the fact that we come from a different culture and we have to sort of reconcile who we are. And I think for me in particular, and maybe you have I'd be curious to know what your um, parallel story might be. But for me, it's always been a competition between am I an academic or am I an artist? And it was never like you can be an academic artist or you could be artistic academic. It was like you're an artist or you're an academic, and you are medical school or computer science, or you are music or acting or something like this. And so I feel like every day, like once I really got rooted into my love for music and my love for the arts, and also my sort of vision for who, and I don't know if that vision was adopted because that's what was expected of me or what have you, but once I was rooted in the fact that I was on a path, but I loved a different path, every day since then, probably in my early teenage, even before, I was having to ask myself, where do I want to go? What part of me is going to win? You know, um, which path am I going to be on? It was never a sense of how do I bring these together. It was always like I have to choose. And so constantly questioning and evaluating and being mindful of these different decisions has made me someone who's had to reconcile with more difficult questions. And so I think for me, it was that sort of like having to choose a path where the two paths seem like they can't reconcile with each other, um, has made me someone who is comfortable with discomfort and, challenging norms and challenging expectations is an uncomfortable thing. And I'm really comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that's my story. What's yours, Mr. Cheese Salami Man?
I mean, I think you know this already. I think the um, the norms that are thrust upon us and the expectations
Mm,
that are thrust upon us, where like you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be
yeah.
an engineer, you're going to be a pharmacist, you're going to be a lawyer, you're
Mm,
going to be a deacon, you're going to get married, you're going to do all of these things,
right.
and you get through checking the boxes thinking that these boxes are going to give you an identity, and then you realize
Mm,
the only thing that these things have done is in some way masked your identity.
yeah. Mm,
And I don't think I am underestimating this when I say that I had an identity crisis in like my mid to late 30s, where I realized I was living a very congruent, where like both
mm,
sides of me were aware of each other, and like I was the same person anywhere I went, but I was
right.
literally doing a double life where this person was living this one, the same person was living this other one, and I felt like I was
Mm,
constantly trying to keep up with two halves of myself, right? Where yes, the two sides benefited from each other, but like you said, even though they informed each other, and who I am made me better at this and who I am made me better at that,
right.
I couldn't see the two as a unified part of a whole.
Sure. Right.
That's something that's new, right? That's something that I'm
Right.
working on now, where it's like, okay, like I'm
Mm,
this person and I love this thing. I'm this same person. I also love this other thing. Maybe I do both separately. Maybe I do
yes.
both together. But at the same time, I'm not wondering which one am I, right?
Right.
And I just had a conversation this morning with Abu Nadam, um, and I'm probably going to post these conversations back to back, where I'll
Mm.
post him on one day and then you on the next day, and then probably follow up with the NYU trifecta, Mira Riyadh. Uh,
Oh, cool.
I think that's going to be awesome. I'm going to post the three of you guys like
Yeah.
back to back to back.
Yeah. Because we were a trio,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
in the
Like yeah,
freshman.
you get so you
That's
you
cool.
guys were a year ahead of me. So you guys started
Mm.
NYU 1996, and
Yeah.
I almost started at NYU 1997.
Mm.
Uh, but for many complex psychological reasons that we're not going to get into
Sure.
now, and that hopefully high school students these days have more
Mm.
resources and guidance,
Mm.
that they're able to work through some of the issues that I think would have put me with you guys at NYU.
Mm.
But the short story is I didn't end up being the fourth Coptic horseman in that group. Um,
Yeah.
you guys were people that I um,
Mm.
was always in awe of,
Mm.
and still am. Um, and anyway, so back to the conversation about identity. This was a very palpable um, concern in my conversation with Abuna Dan, which is, who are we, and how do
Mm.
we, as Copts outside of Egypt, remain Coptic as an identity,
Mm.
with the history that we have, that our parents expose us to, and
Right.
things that we're aware of, but are able to sort of rediscover for ourselves and
Hmm.
understand for ourselves, where we can, be a fully Coptic version of ourselves that doesn't
Sure.
conform to certain norms and to certain ideals.
Well, so I think there is it's an ideal to be able to say, like, yes, we can define what it means to be Coptic if we as Coptic individuals, sort of live out the fullness of, you know, who we are, what we want to do, etc. But there's like two different planes here, right? Because we can say, yeah, yeah, I fully conform to being Coptic because I am Coptic because my parents are Coptic, so therefore, or there's also a common contract of what it means to be Coptic and what happens when they don't, when they don't line up, and who gets to decide what that sort of, I don't know if it's a social contract or a contract of heritage, or because it means something very different in Egypt than it did here in the States and other parts of the diaspora. So I don't know. I mean, it's a really good thing, but I would challenge because I feel like there is a very strong social contract of what it means to be Coptic. So just by saying like, oh, I'm as Coptic as so and so, may not be received in the same sort of, oh well, for sure. Could absolutely be a challenge to that. I mean, and you just go on any forum online, like that, and that's a historical record. You have, this sort of the internet, and you have Coptic people, and by the way, this applies to pretty much any community, um, interacting with very different experiences with almost the safety of their computers. People get to be a little bit more forthright in what they believe, and you see that there are conflicts. There are conflicts around, well, how can you say that you are this if you believe in that? Um, so is it enough to say, Mina, that like, okay, just because we're Coptic, we are fully Coptic? Are we fully Coptic? And according to who? According to ourselves, according to the Coptic identity consortium in Vienna? Like, I don't know, but personally, um, I think I've started to identify as, human being first. I don't know where Coptic lines up in the list of identities because we all have many of them, but I think like not even human being, like I feel like living being is kind of the first level that I go to these days, and understanding myself and others' connection to nature as a very primary um, aspect of our lives, which we don't really pay too much attention to, I think. But that's a whole other thread. Um, so so yeah, I mean, what do you think about that in terms of the social definition versus the individual definition, and does it matter?
I think that the main point that Abuna Dan made is
Mm,
something that I'm 100% on board with, which is
mm,
dialogue.
mm,
Um, and if if we don't have an openness to discuss what it means to be Coptic, then it
right,
becomes that, Vienna consortium, like,
right.
you get a stamp, you don't get a stamp, you're approved, you're rejected.
Mm,
But if we're open to having these conversations and saying, okay, well, I'm going to be a musician, and like the
mm,
initial reaction is okay, like like hold on a second, like let's have the conversation. And in the dialogue we realize, oh, you're going to be a talented, successful musician that is able to live and to contribute and to be
mm,
creative, and to love and to add a dimension of wholeness to our community that, you know is supposed to be the body of Christ in Corinthians 12. But instead of
mm,
being eyes and ears and nose and mouth and heart and shoulder and
and
fingers,
and and eyebrows.
eyebrows and mustaches.
Yes.
um, we're left with, sorry, we only accept you if you're a heart or a brain or a pinky
Mm.
toe. Like,
Oh yeah.
but
Oh yeah.
I don't want to be a pinky toe. Like, sorry, like either get in line or that's it. So
Yeah. So
so yes,
that was yeah.
I think because we're not allowed to have these conversations, and there are certain things that are non-starters for our community,
Hmm.
they become a reason for people to go, well, I guess I have no place here. Like, I would have made a pretty good elbow, but you guys don't want an elbow.
Yeah. And what do we want? Is it just, but just we're a community of biceps. We're all biceps. We're all, like, and that's the thing. How does a body function that is homogeneous? It can't, or it can for maybe like a couple of hours. And what does that mean on the grand scale? And um, I'll never forget this really kind of funny thing from back in the day. We would go on these retreats, and our priest, Father Gerges, I remember someone he was teaching on Corinthians 12 about the body of Christ, and some people are the nose, some people are the mouth, some people are the eyes, some people are the feet. And someone asked, I forget who it was, Father, what happens if I'm just an eyebrow? Because the eyebrow, like, what does the eyebrow do? He's, you know, and I remember his response was something along the lines of, yeah, you may be only an eyebrow, but the eyebrow is very important. And so they're like, how do you figure? He's like, have you seen someone without eyebrows? Just- I mean, like, not to, hate on folks who don't have eyebrows, but it's just the idea that, like, something is missing when they're not there, and we notice it. That's how we, every person as they are is a perfect for the community, and, like, essential to the community. Now, whether or not the community accepts this is a completely different story. And I'll tell you right now, the community is not accepting this, which is why we are a small fraction, not even half. We are a sliver of who and what we could be, because we are unable to understand the importance of these essential differences that we all have, which is, I believe, a God-given gift and part of the whole design to begin with. That we are, unique animals. We can bring something different. So, how do we get there? Um, yeah, it's a good question, and part of it also is, like, who's willing to do what it takes to get us there, and that's another thing, and that's something that I have, as I've wrestled with, like, what is my role in this, and do I want to have a role in this, and can I have a role? Is there a space to make a difference? Yeah, and I think different parts of my life I was more involved than others in the trying to do this, and um, I think one of the greatest fallacies and it sort of goes back to the conversation we were having about, choosing, am I an artist, or am I academic, am I this or am I that? And you were talking about the two different halves, is like, and I don't know if this is just a generational thing. I don't know if our parents or our forebears had the same realization as they grew up, but at some point in my adult life, and I don't know if you've experienced this yourself, I came to an understanding that this idea of, like, having to choose, and by the way, like, is always a choice. There's always choices to be made, and that's a universal truth. However, the things that we're being told we have to choose between is an illusion. It is not real. These are things that we adopt, and and I would love to learn the anthropological benefit of why. Maybe that's how we developed as a society. We had to choose that we weren't going to be hunter gatherers, we're going to be farmers. That way we can build cities and this and that. But at some point in my adult life, I got to a point where it was very clear that the choice was an illusion. That I am an artist. I am a software engineer. And as a software engineer, I'm an artist. And as a musician, I'm an engineer. And they are completely inseparable. And I can choose to, and that was my struggle. That was my like young adult struggle. It's, as you know, I started off in consulting, did consulting for 2 years. 9/11 happened. I decided like, whoa, like everything is so like transient and unpredictable, and let me like maybe try something else. And I went to music school. And I'll never forget that anytime during those years, I would tell people like, oh, so Paul, what in church, Paul, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm studying music composition. I'm getting a master's degree. Like, oh, Malish, it's okay. The economy is very bad, so it's okay that you're doing this right now. It's like, no, like this is what I'm choosing because I want to do this. This is not a, I'm not asking for your sympathy here. But these kinds of subtleties, like this is part of the this is what we're wrestling with. So, anyways, I'm sorry, I got a bit long-winded, but yeah, the illusion of choice. And I'm wondering, do you agree? And was there a turning point when you decided, when you learned that, what these different identities that we have to choose, like we could actually these sort of very rigid choices were more of an illusion than anything else.
I mean, I followed a different path where, you know, I saw the hoops and I just jumped, right? Where it's like,
Mm,
that's next. Okay, that's next. Okay, that's next. Like, check this
yeah.
box, then this box, then this box. And then again, like at the end of all these boxes getting checked, I was like, okay, like,
Mm,
like
yeah.
I felt like myself, right? But
Right.
I was told like, okay, these are the things that you need to do. I'm like, okay, now I did them. Now what? And like I used to joke
Mm,
around about the tragedy of being like, okay, like I finished training, so I'm working.
mm,
I'm
right.
married. Um, I have kids. I serve in Sunday school. I'm a deacon. I've already checked all the boxes. Like, what's the only box left? Like to die? Like, you know, what's like
Mm,
now the only thing left for me to be a good copt is to have a good funeral. So just don't screw it up between now and then, right? The only
yeah.
thing I can do is just strap myself in and go, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay,
But try not to die between Palm Sunday and Good Friday, because then you can't even do that. You can't even have a good funeral.
right. So like I didn't know what to do next. Like I was
Mm,
paralyzed because I was like, okay, like I'm done with the color by number. Like
mm,
teacher, here you go.
yeah. Yeah.
Now what? And the teacher goes, okay, good job. Just sit there and stare at your color by number. And I'm like, what? Like I thought I thought I was gonna turn this in for like a canvas,
Mm,
right? And
right.
that's not what our again, I don't want to be critical, but that's
Right.
not what our community offers, right? It doesn't offer us a canvas. It offers us a color by number that we present and say, ta-da, Coptic.
Yeah.
Why? Why don't we just give people a canvas? Yes, by all means, give them uh, a way of approaching it and give them the materials
Mm,
and teach them how to paint. And if they're, splattering the paint on the walls, kind of go,
mm.
is that is that good? Should we be doing that with the paint? Like, shouldn't you be a little bit better in making like a
Right.
nice canvas? Like there are
Yeah.
rules, right? We're not saying there's no rules, do whatever you want. And Buna Dan touched on this when he was saying,
Mm,
no, they're and he, I mean, he, how thoughtful and caring he is. And he was
yes.
exceptional about this when he said, you
Hmm.
know, I he said that he wishes that he were more convincing, right? When someone's really harming themselves, right? Where instead
Mm,
of painting on their canvas, they're splattering the paint on the walls. He said, listen, if someone's like doing methamphetamine or heroin or really harming themselves with like a dangerous lifestyle, he wants to be able to pull them in and be like, hey, like I care about you, I love you, I don't think you're doing something good for yourself, right? But at the same time, when someone's doing something that's good, right? Forget benign, like something that's like
Hmm.
like what difference does it make? Like you go away to college or you stay for college, like what difference does it make, right? Like you should be able to be a Christian wherever you go, right? But when someone's doing something good, like getting a master's in music competition, composition, and being creative in the world, like why are we saying no, 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 don't paint a dinosaur, you have to paint an elephant, we all paint elephants, like but I want to
Yeah.
paint a dinosaur, like
Yeah.
no, you paint what we tell you to paint.
When I was in eighth grade, I remember a woman from Egypt came to our church probably a few years earlier, Hanet Ibrahim, um, and she, spotted me playing music in the church basement, and she said, hey, we can work together. And as an eighth grader, the idea that we could make a recorded like an album was so cool. And so like using like all like the pre auto accompaniment buttons, like we went to some recording studio in Baldwin, New York, made this. It was a cassette tape. Like that was the medium. It was cassette tape of just like basically songs in Arabic and then songs in English that were translated from Arabic. And it was a really sweet, you know, not like the most professional. We recorded the whole thing in one day. Just for comparison, Trinity took a year of recording in terms of just like the process of. And I remember feeling so proud, like I made a record in eighth grade, and it was like printed. I mean, the cover was hand drawn by Hannah's mom, and it was like so sweet with like little angels and stuff. And I remember feeling so like proud. I remember I took a box of these cassette tapes, and I decided as an eighth grader, I convinced my dad to take me to church bookstores in the tri-state area. By the time I got to the second one, I was done because as an eighth grader, like I remember going to the bookstore like, hey, like, my friends and I are from this church in Long Island. We made this tape and it's these songs, and like the youth can like it because it has English, and the elders can like it because it has Arabic. And they looked at it, they saw the titles, they heard some of the things, they heard music, they heard composition, they heard harp, and it was like literally I was asked to leave. It was like this is not what we sell here. Please take your tapes and go elsewhere because this is not Coptic. Like, and that was like, this is not Coptic. Like, you as a Coptic person made something that isn't Coptic. It's almost like the same thing. Like, it kind of reminds me when people ask me like, well, do you guys eat Egyptian food at home? I'm like, well, my parents are Egyptian, so therefore, yeah, we had Egyptian food growing up because the food that Egyptians make is Egyptian food. And I think over time, there's a certain cuisine that develops, but doesn't take away the fact that like an Egyptian made this food, and therefore it comes from all that learning and all that tradition, even if it is spaghetti, you know. But
No, but
anyways,
like if the spaghetti is made with kamoon, like
exactly, exactly,
like
exactly.
there's
Thank you.
gonna be like a little Egyptian Coptic,
Yeah,
flavor.
like, and by the level of the food coma afterwards, like how Egyptian it was,
Right,
so.
right. Like, did you use butter or oil or semolina?
Mm,
If you
some,
said
yeah,
that, like, it's
yeah,
pretty Egyptian.
totally, totally. Um,
So,
so yeah, I mean that was like that was a very early experience in what you just spoke about. Like here's paint. Okay, you can paint. Cool. Oh, but you painted the wrong thing. Luckily, I'm a really stubborn human being, and I'm like I took that as okay. Well, I'm gonna get in these bookstores. I'm gonna find a way to because I feel it because I believed in my heart this was legitimate work. This was legitimate. This was good work for our community, for our youth, to remind our youth that we are not just to be curators of art. Like, we're not just a museum. Like, yes, we have all this rich history, this rich tradition, this heritage, and I understand and respect the need to preserve and to, you know, to yeah, you know, to preserve. But at the same time, if our only task is preservation, then we're just curators of art, and we are the same as anyone who puts beautiful things in glass cases that no one can touch. Or are we supposed to be artists? Are we supposed to be artists ourselves making art? And I'm of the perspective that, you know, there would be no art to curate if we as cops or we as people were always meant to be curators. We would have nothing that we have right now. We would have none of the art, none of the icons, none of the hymns, none of the ritual, none of the ceremony. We would just be preserving something. And so, no, I believe that we are to be artists. And that was one of the reasons I decided, no, you know what? Thanks for the numbers, paint by numbers. Because here's the other thing. No one is going to give us a canvas. We all have a canvas. We don't need to wait for anyone to give us a canvas saying, hey, you are allowed to paint. Guess what? No one's going to give you the canvas. You already have a canvas. You already have it. We all have this sort of blank slate that we can actually put anything on if we wanted to. And that's kind of the beauty of our existence. And I love it when multiple people sort of see things this way. We can actually create beautiful things together, because we see the possibilities and we can do really cool things. Like, for example, Mina, what do you know about online influencers? What do you know about social media marketing? Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, you don't even know what I do for a living. So like, yeah. So, and yet at the same time, you had in your mind, I can create a web series based on the fact that I'm really into my facial hair this month, and I could turn it into something really meaningful and have guests on and have conversations. And suddenly it's this thing. There's a brand. Like, you go on your webpage, you see a bunch of yellow icons with mustaches on them, with names on them. It's like, whoa. It's like, yeah, you can do things. You know, you can. All it takes is like the courage to just start. And I feel like I'm face to face with someone who understands that they have a canvas, and it's not just paint by numbers. Because if it were, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. But I do have another question.
But why did it take so long, right? Like, why did I have to be 40 years old before I gave myself the permission to paint on canvas, right? And I think that we don't have a choice. We have an obligation to tell our youth, people in middle school, high school, college, graduates, anybody in our community that has been handed a color by number, and they're like, I don't want to paint an elephant. I'm sorry. Like, I'm just like, it's not me. And they should be invited back with their canvas to paint whatever they like.
Right.
Because if we don't do that, the end result is not that they, color by number and they're totally fine. The end result is they either color by number and then they're left wondering, I wonder what I would have painted, right? And there's that dissonance and there's that conflict within them. Or they're like, okay, that's fine. I'm going to take my canvas somewhere else. I'll go paint over there. They'll let me paint whatever I want.
Right. And I've done that too. And I continue to do that. There are sometimes you just need to paint. And if they're not allowing paint over here, okay, cool, thanks. I respect that we're not painting dinosaurs here, but like, I have this really cool dinosaur idea, and you know what? I may not live till tomorrow, so let me paint this dinosaur. And but the question that you asked, why did it take so long? I want to challenge you on this, and I want to actually, I would encourage and maybe invite you to look at it maybe a little bit differently. Why did it take so long? Because I could also ask myself the same question. Like, why did it take so long to realize that I didn't have to choose between software and music? I can just be a software musician or whatever, you know? Why did it take so long? And yes, you know, there's always a million things that could have happened if. There's also a million things that couldn't have happened if. So who really cares and who really knows? But let me put it this way. If our story as individuals only begins and ends with our birth and our death, then yeah, we took a pretty damn long time. But that is not the reality. Like our stories go back really far, and our stories are going to continue going. You know, there are the generations behind us, the generations in front of us. So you come into this realization, Mina, is just a continuation of like your parents' story and like your dad's story. And like he's a continuation of his and so on and so forth. So you realizing what you did when you did it is right on time for your story. And yes, it's a perspective and it is a choice that we can choose to see things this way. But the fruits of this choice far outweigh the fruits of choosing regret, limitations, what if, choosing to see things as like right on time. This is part of something longer. Really frees you up to do like more and more things. And so, yeah, I do believe that our stories are not just our own lives. Like we're a continuation. Maybe us learning this in our 30s and 40s is going to empower our younger sisters and brothers to figure this out in their teens and 20s, and maybe their kids are gonna. So, I don't know. I am choosing to believe that we are right on time.
Always with a thoughtful and gracious perspective, Paul. I appreciate that.
Mm.
So I know you have a meeting coming up, so I don't want to
Mm.
hold you any longer than your time allows. And I'm
Mm.
so grateful for you to schedule this into your workday. And I'm sure you and I will continue this conversation
Yeah.
perpetually. But for the people listening in on this snippet of this part of our ongoing conversation, do you
Mm.
have any parting words of wisdom for them?
It's a lot of pressure, you know, parting words of wisdom. Like, I actually have a question more than anything else is, um, I know I I appreciate you inviting me to be here. Um, I'm here in this. I'm in Arizona with some good friends, and I was just telling them about this. You know, I'm like, just so you guys know, tomorrow morning you're gonna see me with a mustache, and and everyone's gonna watch this, by the way. So you're gonna have at least five more audience members after today.
That's gonna like
Um,
triple the viewership. That's amazing.
right. But I remember asked like, they asked me why is he interviewing you, and I'm like, I have no idea. And because and I also I want to ask you like what I feel like there are so many more interesting people to like fill your time with, and so from that perspective, I feel like grateful that you've asked me to be part of this because I saw the names of the folks you've been interviewing. These are like, you know, some of them I know, some of them I don't know, but like the ones that I've seen, you know, yeah, like I understand. I'm curious, like, is there anything, you know, you hoped to get out of a conversation like this, or would like to, or yeah, I guess there's more of like a purpose question that I want to pose to you just to trip you up a little bit, but also I'm also curious for myself, like, you know, why are we here now having this conversation?
I mean, when we get into these philosophical questions, none of them are new.
Mm,
And the way I would answer this is that instead of looking at it from a post enlightenment um, philosophical lens of epistemology, which is like how do we know or what do we know and how do we know it, and
right.
like what is the inherent value of what you said, and the interview in terms of its content and its rational, reasonable merit, and
Mm,
shift into a more classical, ancient spiritual framework, which is more relational. So
mm,
not so much like, oh, Paul has so much to say, and I'm going to interview Paul because
mm,
objectively Paul has these merits, but relationally, to
mm,
me, as someone who is trying to understand himself and
mm,
his community and his place in the world, and to be vulnerable and to share that anxiety, that self
mm.
doubt, that self pursuit to try to understand myself and my
Right,
position in our community and understand each other.
right.
Relationally, you have been an integral part of that. And every
Mm,
single person that is also part of this series also fits into that category. Like
right.
like my conversation with Kufta wasn't like the pinnacle of
Yeah.
um, thought on
Mm,
struggling with the existence of God. Not at all. Like
right.
lots of people have this conversation and they've had it better and more thoughtfully and more nuanced. Fine.
Mm,
But that conversation with Kufta to me as an individual is beneficial and compelling, and it's something that we offer and we
sure.
share to others, and they can have better conversations than we had, but this is the one that we had.
Thank you. So yeah, and for me, I think the reason why I've wanted to sit here with you is one, I always grow from these conversations that we have. Like when we have them, I feel like we have them more often than not, like in person, but that hasn't really happened. And we've had a number of these great conversations during this quarantine, and you know, meeting in this way. This is maybe the cleanest I've been in our conversations. Usually, like I actually showered for this. Um, so you're welcome. Uh,
Very good, thank you.
yeah, I mean, yeah, well, anyways, uh, yeah, and so I knew that this was going to help me start my day with something interesting to chew on. And I always enjoy conversing with you, Mina, because of, you know, what you shared about me is mutual. It's vice versa. You've been and you are and you will be an integral part of my own sort of searching and development and life path. And I'm honored that that's the case. Um, so, parting words of wisdom. By the way, all this was just filler to get me to think about what words of wisdom I wanted to say. So now that I have it, couple of things. One, uh, take your fish oil. Take fish oil every single day because, and this is not mine, by the way. This is the combination of two pieces of advice from two very important people in my life. But take your fish oil every day. Why? Because life is going to go up, life is going to go down. You're going to have hard times, and things are going to go like to crap, and you may not know what's going on, or things might be great. Whatever it is, one day you're going to be in a really chill place, and you want to know that you took your fish oil this whole time, so you're going to have a really healthy body, and you get to enjoy the place that you're in once you get there, once you're done struggling. So just keep taking your vitamins, take your fish oil. Number two, don't be. That's my second advice. Just this is going to give you, Mina, some motivation to learn sound editing and editing.
I'm not I already told everybody I'm not editing. I'm
But
not
that's,
editing.
yeah, no, but that is this is the world right now is really torn. There's a lot of strife, a lot of division, a lot of angst. Just be kind to each other.
So you are the only person that I'm gonna have to put like an explicit, like YouTube asks you like, is this meant for kids? And usually I click no, because it's not meant for kids. But now on top of that, I have to be like, sorry, there's some bad language here.
I mean, did you expect any different? I mean,
I
come on.
did, I did. Even
Okay.
Ralph Toss behaved himself.
Well, Mina, I'll help you with the editing later. It'll be a fun little collaboration. That way you can still keep your family friendly channel going.
Okay, like if you could just beep that out, please, because I don't know how to be honest, like people think like I don't edit as a matter of integrity. I just
Mm,
don't I just don't know how to do it.
no. Right, right.
I don't know how to do it. Like I would love to beep you out. I just don't know how.
Um, cool. We'll meet later and do
Yeah,
this. But
I'll send it to you. So hopefully whoever's listening to
mm,
this actually had it beeped out and they've
mm,
appreciated the fruits of your labor and your
mm.
contribution, both in soiling and cleaning up the recording.
Anytime, man. That's my role. That's the gift I want to give to you. So, um, thanks again, Mina. This was a lot of fun, and
It's been a pleasure to have you, Paul, and thank you everyone for listening.